If a dog keeps barking, it's not just noise. Bang. It's a warning. The bark echoed to the halls of Woodridge Elementary, like an alarm no one wanted to hear. It wasn't just loud. It was furious, relentless, targeted. What should have been a cheerful career day turned into a chilling stand-still-the-moment officer, Kane's retired K-9, Ranger, locked eyes with a seemingly kind-hearted second-grade teacher and wouldn't stop barking. It wasn't barking for attention. It wasn't fear. It was something else entirely. And it wouldn't take long before everyone understood why. Woodridge was the kind of school that made parents feel safe. Small classrooms, bright murals, friendly staff. It was a type of place where kids brought in cookies for birthdays and where PTA meetings ended with hugs. So when Officer Kane, a local hero and K-9 handler, volunteered to bring in his retired partner, Ranger, for a safety demonstration, the school rolled out the red carpet. Miss Clara Langston, the new second-grade teacher, was all smiles. That morning, her classroom was filled with cutout stars and posters that read, "Kindness is contagious." She wore a red cardigan, soft glasses, and a warm smile that could put any shy child at ease. No one questioned her presence. No one ever thought to until Ranger walked in. He didn't sniff around like he usually did. No wagging tail. No easygoing charm. He entered that classroom and froze. Eyes narrowed, muscles tight, nose twitching in the air. Then came the bark. A single, sharp, aggressive bark that cut through the cheerful chatter like a razor. Everyone laughed at first. Maybe he saw a squirrel through the window, but then he moved. Ranger lunged 2 steps forward, ears pinned back, growling low and guttural, but he wasn't barking at a window. He was barking at Miss Langston. "Whoa, buddy." Officer Kane tugged gently at Ranger's leash, caught off guard. Ranger down, but Ranger wouldn't stop. He lunged again, this time louder, teeth bared. The kids gasped. One little girl started to cry. Miss Langston raised both hands and backed up toward the whiteboard. "I don't know what's gotten into him. Maybe he smells my lunch," she said. "Ma'am, do you have meat or something in your pockets?" Kane asked politely, trying to de-escalate. "No, just a granola bar," she said, forcing a laugh, though her eyes flickered to her desk. Ranger kept barking. The noise wasn't just disruptive now. It was unnerving. The kind of barking that made your skin crawl, like your body understood something your brain didn't. "Maybe we should step out," Miss Langston offered quickly. "We don't want to scare the kids." Kane hesitated, tugging again on Ranger's leash. Ranger resisted, still focused, tail stiff, growling low. In the back row, Lucy Parker, a quiet brown-eyed girl with a purple hoodie and mismatched socks, sat frozen in her chair. She looked at Miss Langston, then at Ranger, her fingers gripping the straps of her backpack tighter. At lunch, the faculty lounge was buzzing. "Dogs don't just act like that," said Mrs. Huntley, the school nurse, "especially ones like Ranger. He's trained." "He's also old," said Vice Principal Monroe with a shrug. "Maybe his senses are off. Could be PSD." Officer Kane sat silently, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup. His eyes weren't on the teachers. They were on Ranger, who sat near the window, still alert, still watching, still agitated. He wasn't relaxing, and he hadn't barked at anyone else that day. That evening, Kane called his captain. Something wasn't sitting right. "Cap, you know Ranger, you know how disciplined he is. Today, something was wrong." "Who was the woman?" the captain asked. "New teacher, Clara Langston, moved here from upstate last fall. Clean background check, apparently." "Apparently," Kane paused. "Something about her doesn't sit right with Ranger, and I trust him more than I trust my own instincts." The line went quiet. Then the captain said, "Follow up quietly and keep Ranger with you." The next day at school, Miss Langston greeted everyone with extra cheer. She handed out smiley stickers and gave Lucy a pink eraser in the shape of a unicorn. Lucy smiled faintly, but her eyes were tired. She hadn't slept well. She'd had nightmares about barking. After the morning bell, Officer Kane returned, this time under the guise of a follow-up K-9 demo. Ranger entered the room again, and again he snapped to alert. This time, though, he didn't bark at Miss Langston. He walked straight to Lucy, sniffed her backpack, froze. Then one short bark. The room went still. Lucy shrank back into her chair. Her lips quivered. Miss Langston stood slowly. "Officer, I assure you," she began, but Kane had already moved. "Lucy, sweetheart, can I take a quick look inside your backpack?" Miss Langston took a step forward. "Officer, I don't think that's necessary. She's just a child. Surely, we don't want to frighten her." Kane turned sharply. "Ma'am, please stay back." He crouched by Lucy, gave her the softest smile he could manage. "You're not in trouble. I promise. I just need to make sure you're safe." Lucy nodded slowly and handed the backpack over. Kane opened it. At first, all he saw was a pencil case, a Hello Kitty folder, a worn notebook. Then something small, cold, slid into his hand. His eyes narrowed. It was a syringe cap, used, no medical note, hidden deep beneath the lining. Next to it, a small cloth strip with faint discoloration. Smelled sweet, artificial, like chloroform. He looked up at Lucy, who was now pale. "Who gave you this, Lucy?" he asked. She whispered. "She told me to carry it. She said if I didn't, something bad would happen to my mom." Gasps broke across the room. Miss Langston backed toward the door, face drained of color. But Ranger was already between her and the exit, teeth bared, growling low. She froze. So did the class. And no one, not even the bravest teacher in the hallway, dared to move. You could have heard a pin drop. The classroom, usually filled with giggles, pencil tapping, and lunchbox zippers, had gone stone silent. 22nd graders sat frozen, their wide eyes shifting between Officer Kane, Lucy, and the woman they'd all trusted up until 5 minutes ago, Miss Clara Langston. Outside the window, the flag flapped gently in the wind. Inside, nothing moved except Ranger. The German shepherd took slow, deliberate steps toward Miss Langston. Head low, growled deep in his throat, blocking her escape like he knew exactly what she was capable of. Kane kept his hand firm on Lucy's backpack. The small claw still clutched in his gloved hand. The syringe cap lay quietly on the desk like a piece of evidence that screamed louder than words. "Lucy," Kane said softly, his voice dropping low, like he was talking to his own daughter. "Can you tell me exactly who gave you this?" Lucy nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. "She did," she whispered. "She said if I didn't keep it with me, something bad would happen to my mom." Miss Langston opened her mouth, probably to deny it, but nothing came out. The school principal, Mrs. Atkins, burst into the room seconds later, her heels clacking against the linoleum floor. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Why is Ranger growling? Why is that child crying?" Kane straightened, still holding the backpack. "Ma'am, I need you to call district security and local law enforcement now." Mrs. Atkins blinked, stunned. "Why?" "Because I just found paraphernalia used in abductions inside a second grader's backpack, and that child says her teacher gave it to her." The color drained from Mrs. Atkins' face. "Go," Kane said firmly. "Take Lucy with you, and no one lets Miss Langston leave this building." Miss Langston's smile had disappeared. Her shoulders slouched as if the mask she'd worn for months had finally grown too heavy to hold up. She slowly raised her hands, still trying to appear calm. "This is a huge misunderstanding," she said gently. "I would never—" "Don't," Kane cut her off. "Just don't." He motioned to Ranger with a short whistle. The K-9 stepped even closer, growling louder. Miss Langston stiffened but didn't move. 2 assistant teachers had gathered at the doorway, unsure whether to step in. One of them grabbed a walkie and radioed for the school's on-site deputy. Everything from that moment moved fast. Deputy Barnes arrived and cuffed Miss Langston quietly, without reading her rights in front of kids. Kane had requested it. The last thing these children needed was to watch their beloved teacher get hauled out like a criminal, even if that's what she was. Later that afternoon, Kane sat in the school's admin conference room, a yellow legal pad in front of him. Ranger lay at his feet, calm now but watchful. Lucy sat beside her mom, who had arrived breathless after being pulled from her job at a local pharmacy. The woman's eyes were red. Her hands shook as she held Lucy's. I don't understand, she said. Why would a teacher, why would she give my daughter that stuff? We don't know everything yet, Kane said. But based on the cloth and syringe remnants, we're assuming it's an attempted conditioning tactic, psychological manipulation. She might have been grooming Lucy for something bigger. Grooming? The mom's voice cracked. She used fear, Kane said. Told Lucy something bad would happen to you if she didn't carry the items. It's a common tactic in trafficking operations. Break the child's spirit early. Lucy's mom clapped a hand over her mouth. Kane gently slid over a tissue box. Heart heavy. He'd worked dozens of missing child cases. This one had just been averted by inches, and by a ranger. Later that night, Kane pulled into his driveway just as the streetlights came on. The porch light glowed warmly, casting shadows over Ranger's worn vest, which still sat on the passenger seat beside him. He turned off the engine and exhaled. You still got it, he whispered, reaching over and giving the K9 a slow scratch behind the ear. Ranger looked at him. No bark, no wag, just understanding. Inside the house, Kane poured kibble into Ranger's bowl and fixed himself a sandwich he'd probably forget to eat. His mind was still in that classroom, still with Lucy. She had looked at him like he was the only safe person in the world. That kind of trust, it's heavy. He pulled out his laptop and logged into the Federal Missing Persons database. There it was. Clara Langston wasn't her real name. Fingerprint match. Natalie Graves, suspected of child trafficking ties in Nevada, Oregon, and New Mexico. Warrants had been issued, but she vanished before any arrest. Until now. The next morning, Kane returned to the school, not in uniform. Not with Ranger, just a quiet visit. Lucy was sitting on the front steps of the office building, waiting for her mom to finish paperwork. She saw him and lit up, her face cautious but hopeful. Is she gone? Lucy asked. She won't ever hurt you again, Kane said gently, crouching down to her level. Lucy nodded. Can I say thank you to Ranger? Of course. He walked her over to the cruiser where Ranger was resting in the back. The moment the window rolled down, Ranger's ears perked, tail thumping gently. Lucy smiled and reached her hand forward. Ranger leaned in, licking her fingers. Thank you, she whispered. Then she leaned closer and said something that Kane would never forget. He knew before anyone else. He knew she was bad. I wish I listened sooner. As Kane drove away with Ranger in the back seat, he glanced at the dog through the rearview mirror. You saw something none of us did, he muttered. The dog simply yawned and curled up. But Kane knew the truth. Ranger hadn't just saved Lucy. He'd saved them all. 2 days after the arrest, the halls of Woodridge Elementary were quieter than usual. The walls still had glittery posters and construction paper leaves hanging from classroom doors. But the energy had shifted. Parents lingered longer at drop-off. Teachers kept their doors cracked open, and kids glanced nervously every time they heard the jingle of keys or the squeak of a shoe down the hall. Miss Clara Langston's classroom sat empty now. The nameplate had been removed. Her sunflower mug still sat on the desk, and a "You Are Loved" sign above the whiteboard felt almost mocking. Inside the front office, Officer Kane sat with Principal Atkins and Detective Sheila Moran, reviewing a folder thick enough to give anyone a migraine. Real name, Natalie Graves, Moran said, tapping the top of the file. Multiple aliases, forged credentials, state-certified teaching license from Arizona. Completely fake. She passed a background check. Principal Atkins whispered, still in shock, because she knew exactly how to work around it. Kane said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. She used a different identity. Clean records. Nothing flagged, unless you dug 3 layers deep. She taught here for nearly 6 months, Zatkin said. Was she targeting Lucy that whole time? Moran nodded. We believe so. Lucy's mother recently filed for full custody after a messy divorce. Natalie likely saw vulnerability, saw a kid stuck between parents, emotionally isolated and easy to manipulate. Kane's jaw tightened. But what was her end game? Zatkins asked. Moran flipped to a photo, a blurry still from a traffic cam. Natalie, wearing a wig, standing next to a man in dark sunglasses. This man's name is Curtis Vane, she said. He's been under investigation for running an underground trafficking ring out of Colorado. We believe Natalie was grooming Lucy to be taken, possibly over the upcoming spring break when her mom would have been working overtime. Kane clenched his fists under the table. So, Ranger didn't just stop a teacher. He stopped a shipment. Moran nodded. That dog saved her life. That afternoon, Kane walked Ranger around the school for a final check. The staff had asked him to bring the dog back, not for show this time, but as a symbol of safety. The kids needed to see the hero again. Outside the cafeteria, little groups of students were already whispering and pointing. One bold boy waved. "Ranger!" he yelled. "Is it true he sniffed out a criminal?" Kane smiled faintly. He sure did. "Is he like a superhero?" a girl asked, clutching her backpack tighter. Kane knelt beside them. "He's just a dog with good instincts. The best partner I've ever had." Ranger looked up at Kane, tail wagging once. Meanwhile, across town in a windowless room at the county sheriff's office, Natalie Graves sat cuffed to a metal table. She didn't look like a monster. That's what made it worse. Clean sweater, polite smile, calm eyes. Detective Moran stepped into the room and slid a photo across the table. Lucy's class picture. "She trusted you," Moran said. "You looked her in the eye and told her she was safe. Then you made her carry tools meant to control her." Natalie glanced at the photo. No emotion. "I was helping her," she said. "She's 7. Moran snapped. 7. She had no idea what was happening. Natalie shrugged slightly. She would have forgotten eventually. Kids do. Moran leaned in. Not when a dog remembers for them. Natalie's expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "You didn't expect Ranger," Moran said. "You didn't expect a dog to be your undoing." The next day, Lucy sat in the school counselor's office, a crayon in one hand and a picture of a brown and tan German shepherd taking shape on the paper. "He's always watching," she said softly, "even when no one else sees it." Her mom sat beside her, holding back tears. "Do you know what courage is?" the counselor asked. Lucy nodded. "It's when you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway." "Exactly. And that's what you did." Lucy looked down at her drawing. "No," she said. "Ranger did." Kane watched from the hallway window as Lucy hugged her mom tightly. For the first time in days, she looked like a kid again. He stepped back, hands in his pockets. Principal Zatkins joined him quietly. "We're redoing all our background check protocols," she said. "We'll make sure nothing like this happens again." "It wasn't your fault," Kane replied. "Predators don't wear warning signs. They wear smiles." "Still," she said, "we'll do better." They both looked into the classroom where students now sat in a circle, talking about safe adults and trusted voices. "Will Ranger come back?" she asked. Kane smiled. He never really left. That night, Kane stood on his porch, watching the stars come out. Ranger lay at his feet, chewing lazily on an old tennis ball. "You did good," Kane murmured. "You always do." He picked up the ball and tossed it gently across the yard. Ranger chased it, quick and graceful despite his age. For a moment, the world was still again. Then Kane's phone buzzed. It was Detective Moran. "They flipped her," she said. "Natalie gave us a name. 2 more schools, 2 more aliases. We're getting ahead of it now." Kane closed his eyes. The system wasn't perfect. But sometimes a dog's instinct was all it took to start saving lives. The sun hadn't even risen when Officer Kane slid into the cold metal chair inside the sheriff's war room. His black coffee tasted like motor oil. And Ranger, half asleep at his feet, didn't bother lifting his head. They had both slept badly, the kind of sleep where your mind stays half awake, waiting for something, anything, to go wrong. Detective Moran stood at the whiteboard, a dry erase marker in hand and tension in her posture. 2 names, she said, tapping the board. "That's what Natalie gave us." She swore it's all she knew. She underlined each alias in red. Carolyn Dwyer, Willow Creek, Illinois. Ms. Dana, no known location. Kane studied the names. "Miss Dana, that's it?" She said the woman was older, ran most of the operations, but never used her real name. No photos, no address, just a voice on the other end of the line. Southern accent. Honey sweet but sharp as glass, she said. Kane rubbed the back of his neck. What about Carolyn? Currently working as a substitute teacher at Willow Creek Elementary. She's been in that district for 3 months under a falsified background check. Moran's voice was sharp now. We've got a window and we're taking it. By 9 a.m., Kane was behind the wheel again, Ranger riding shotgun like always. Willow Creek was 2 towns over, suburban, quiet, soccer fields, sandwich shops, and PTA moms who smiled too wide. It reminded Kane of too many places he'd seen go sideways. The illusion of safety made it easier for predators to hide. As they pulled up to the school, Kane noticed parents still walking their kids in, no clue of the danger possibly brewing just a few feet away. Inside, the front office buzzed with the usual morning chaos. The receptionist barely looked up as she buzzed them in. We're not expecting any police visits today, she said. We're not here to chat, Kane replied, flashing his badge. I need to speak to Miss Dwyer now. The receptionist blinked. She's subbing in 3rd grade, room 104. Kane turned to Ranger. You ready, boy? Ranger stood up, tail stiff, eyes sharp. They moved. Room 104 was a cheerful space. Alphabet rugs, fish tanks, and poster that read, Mistakes are proof you're trying. But the moment Kane opened the door, the air changed. A woman stood at the board, writing math problems in neat, even lines, blonde hair, mid-40s, glasses, ordinary. Too ordinary. The kids turned in their chairs to look at the uniformed man and the K-9 in the doorway. Miss Dwyer turned, a smile halfway across her face. Can I help you? She didn't finish. Ranger stepped forward. One sniff, one look. His entire body tense like a coiled spring. Then a low growl. Kane, move in. I need you to step outside, he said, voice flat. Right now. Excuse me, she replied, her tone hardening. Is this about a parking violation, or... I said, step outside. She started to argue, but then Ranger growled again, louder. Children shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Miss Dwyer swallowed and placed her marker down. Fine. In the hallway, Kane turned to the 2 officers who'd arrived seconds later and nodded. They cuffed her without ceremony. You have no idea what you're interrupting, she hissed. No, Kane said. You have no idea what he smells. Back at the station, the interrogation didn't take long. Under pressure, and when shown Natalie Graves' signed testimony, Carolyn Dwyer cracked. She was supposed to deliver the next girl over Easter break. Moran said she had the child picked already, a girl named Emma Alvarez, 3rd grade, top student, divorced mom, no father in the picture. Sound familiar? Kane closed his eyes briefly. Yeah, it sounds like Lucy all over again. We stopped her just in time. But what about Miss Dana? Moran exhaled. Still nothing, but I've got feds working on it now. The moment we get a whisper, you and Ranger are our first call. That night, Kane parked the cruiser outside a gas station and let Ranger stretch his legs. The town was quiet. A spring breeze stirred the leaves. Somewhere, a train rumbled in the distance. Kane leaned on the hood of the car and looked up at the sky. You think we'll find her? He asked Ranger. The dog tilted his head. Miss Dana, the ghost behind it all. Ranger didn't answer, of course, but he stood tall, alert, like he was ready to keep going, no matter how long it took. Back at home, Kane fed Ranger and flipped on the news. A segment ran about the growing ring of fake educators being investigated. Lucy's story was mentioned briefly. Her name changed for privacy, but Kane knew it was her. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a photo, one from Ranger's early days. Sitting proud in his vest, mouth open in a panting grin. You've stopped more than bullets, Kane said quietly. You've stopped monsters. His phone buzzed. It was Moran again. They had just intercepted a call. A woman, southern drawl, older voice, cold, was recorded saying, Get rid of everything. We've been sniffed out. That damn dog. Miss Dana wasn't gone. She was running, and now she knew about Ranger. The audio clip was only 8 seconds long, but it hit Officer Kane like a freight train. Get rid of everything. We've been sniffed out. That damn dog. She said with a thick southern drawl. Too polished to be uneducated, too sharp to be underestimated. Cold, calculated, and furious. Kane played it 3 times on the drive back from the station, his fingers tightening around the steering wheel each time. Ranger sat in the back seat, quiet, but watching his handler through the rear view mirror. They know you now, Kane muttered. You're not just sniffing around anymore. You're in her nightmares. He tapped the screen to replay the clip one more time. Ranger's ears perked up. The voice wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. At the sheriff's office, the FBI liaison, Agent Porter, had arrived from Dallas, bringing with him more heat than backup. Miss Dana, he said, pacing in front of the investigation board, isn't just a name. It's a phantom. We've been chasing this ghost for 5 years. No fingerprints, no financial records, just phone calls, burner accounts, and victims too scared or too young to speak. He pointed at the map behind him. Dots scattered across Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, and now Illinois. Every confirmed sighting follows a pattern. She plants someone. That person builds trust. Then a child disappears. Always the same profile. Young girls, 7 to 10 single-parent homes, teachers or counselors gaining access. Kane stared at the board, jaw tight. But she just slipped up. She mentioned Ranger by name. Agent Porter nodded. That tells us 2 things. She's paying attention, and she's scared. Kane stepped forward, flipping through the last known call logs from Carolyn Dwyer's burner phone. You traced the number? Bounced off 3 towers. Ended near a town called Marin Hills, Kentucky. Population 4,000, 1 school, no police department, just a volunteer sheriff. Kane looked at Ranger, who was now standing, alert, like he knew something was already happening. Then we go, Kane said. We go before she disappears again. Marin Hill sat tucked between 2 highways and a stretch of farmland. It looked like every small town Kane had ever seen. Churches on every corner, a dairy barn at the edge of town, and a school so old it still had a working bell tower. Kane and Ranger arrived just after sunrise. The air smelled like damp soil and grass. A dog barked in the distance, but it wasn't the kind trained for this kind of work. Sheriff Dean Metcalf met them outside the school, coffee in one hand, suspicion in the other. Not sure what you're expecting to find here, he said. We don't get trouble like that. Trouble never knocks first, Kane replied. That voice we traced. She was close enough to be watching. Metcalf sighed. You think someone here is helping her? I think she could be here. Maybe not as Miss Dana, but she always finds a way in. A teacher, a nurse, even a substitute janitor. Ranger sniffed the ground and began pulling toward the west side of the building. Kane followed. Inside the school, things seemed normal. Too normal. 3rd grade art hung proudly in the hallway. Children's laughter filtered from classrooms. A staff member, an older woman with silver curls, smiled warmly as Kane passed. But Ranger didn't look at her. He kept walking. They passed the library, the gym, the cafeteria. Then outside room 112, speech and counseling services, Ranger froze, ears up, nose twitching. He let out a soft but clear whine. Kane crouched. What is it, boy? Ranger stepped to the door, nose pressed near the floor seam, and growled, low, quiet, but intense. Kane's pulse quickened. He knocked twice. A voice answered cheerfully, Come in. Inside sat a warm-looking woman in her early 60s, glasses perched on the tip of her nose, a pencil skirt, cardigan, soft curls pinned back. You must be the officer, she said. Sheriff told me you might stop by. I'm Miss Darla. I'm the school's part-time speech therapist. Not Dana, Darla. But the vowels hit Kane like a slap. Ranger didn't stop growling. Not this time. Kane scanned the room. A child's folder open on her desk. Files neatly stacked. A school board certificate from Hillside University, a place Kane knew didn't exist. You've only been here a few months? Kane asked, stepping closer. Just since February, she replied. Small towns don't always get full-time specialists. Kane's eyes narrowed. Mind if I ask where you worked before that? She smiled. I've moved around a lot. Military husband, always packing up. And where is your husband now? The smile faded just for a second. Deployed, she said softly. Somewhere overseas. Kane looked at the books on her shelf. Titles about childhood development, attachment trauma, speech recovery. But one book stood out. It wasn't about education at all. It was a memoir, Broken Trust, Inside the Mind of Predator. A sticker covered part of the spine, poorly peeled. Underneath, he could see a barcode stamped Davidson Correctional Library. Kane stepped forward. Miss Darla reached for something in her drawer. Ranger barked, loud, sharp, final. Kane pulled his sidearm. Hands where I can see them. She froze. Her fingers hovered over what looked like a phone. He crossed the room in 2 seconds, yanked open the drawer, and found not a phone but a burner and another folder. Inside, photographs, names, dates, and one in particular, Maya Gibson, age 8, asthmatic, lives with grandmother. Darla didn't run. She just sat down slowly, like a show was over. You won't stop it, she said quietly. Even if you stop me. Kane cuffed her. You said that dog would be your undoing, he whispered. Turns out you were right. Ranger stood by the girl's photo, still growling. Later that evening, Kane stood in the school parking lot. Maya's grandmother had come to pick her up early. The two walked hand in hand, the girl clutching Ranger's neck in a goodbye hug that made Kane's throat tight. She never even talked about that woman, the grandmother said. Just said she always smelled like perfume and made her feel small. She won't come near her again, Kane promised. Back in the cruiser, Kane looked over at Ranger. Every time we think it's done, he said, you show me it's not. Ranger rested his head on Kane's leg. Outside, the first stars appeared. But somewhere more names waited, and they weren't going to find themselves. It was over. At least, that's what they told themselves. When Ms. Darla, a.k.a. Dana Winslow, the woman they'd been chasing across 4 states, was finally arrested and flown to federal custody under heavy surveillance. There were no more fake degrees, no more burner phones, no more aliases. Just one aging woman with a hollow smile, now facing enough charges to keep her behind bars for the rest of her life. But for Officer Kane, closure didn't come with an arrest. It came in the form of a quiet moment, watching Ranger doze peacefully on the front porch, sunlight warming his fur. After weeks of tracking evil through classrooms and playgrounds, you finally caught her, Kane said aloud, sitting beside him with a cup of lukewarm coffee. Not me, not the Bureau. You, Ranger. His ears twitched. He didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. He knew. The community response had been overwhelming. Cards, letters, homemade treats. Some for Kane, most for Ranger. Woodridge Elementary had even voted to rename their school library the Ranger Room. But the thing that meant the most, the children, one by one, the kids who had once been scared to come to school now stopped by to pat Ranger's head or tell him about their day or whisper secrets to his floppy ears. Secrets only a hero could hold without judgment. Lucy Parker was the first to visit after Dana's arrest. She brought Ranger a new collar, red, her favorite color, with a silver tag that simply read, "My best friend." She hugged Kane without saying a word. She didn't have to. Her nightmares had stopped. In the days that followed, Kane met with several parents of the targeted children, Emma, Maya, and others whose names had been on Dana's list. Some cried. Some were furious. Some just held their kids tighter than they ever had before. One mother, hands trembling, looked Kane in the eyes and asked, "How did a dog know what none of us could see?" Kane smiled gently. "Because dogs don't lie to themselves," he said. "They don't ignore instincts. They don't explain away warning signs. They just know and they act." A month later, on a cool Saturday morning, Kane stood before a small crowd gathered under the oaks behind City Hall. A local scout troop had organized a special tribute for Ranger. There was a banner, "Thank you, Ranger, for protecting our future." There were photos, drawings, and even a giant bone-shaped cake, non-edible, of course. But Kane's speech, short and raw, was what stuck. He stepped up to the podium with his hand resting on Ranger's shoulder. "I've worked with this dog for over 7 years. We've chased bad guys, found lost kids, helped crash victims, but nothing prepared me for what he did this year. He looked out at the crowd, at the parents, the teachers, the students. We all want to believe the world is safe, that our schools are sacred, that the adults in charge are trustworthy. But sometimes, evil wears a smile. And when it does, we need someone who can see past the smile, someone who listens with more than ears. He looked down at Ranger, then back up. That someone for us was his dog. That night, Kane and Ranger sat together under the stars again. The breeze was light. The air smelled like pine and fresh-cut grass. Somewhere in the distance, kids laughed, carefree, safe. Kane took a long breath, leaned back in his chair, and spoke softly. You saved more lives than most people ever will, buddy. Not with violence, not with force, but with instinct, with courage. Ranger looked up, eyes wise, and rested his chin on Kane's boot. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was sacred. In the end, it wasn't a badge or a gun or a database that saved those children. It was a dog's refusal to ignore what his gut told him. It was a child's whisper finally being heard. And it was a town learning that trust must be earned and instinct should never be silenced. We often teach kids to be polite, to listen, to obey. But sometimes the most important thing we can teach them is this. When something feels wrong, it probably is, speak up, ask questions, and never be afraid to bark, because the truth has a sound. And sometimes that sound is a growl in a quiet classroom.